wassalamu ala rasulillah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the relationship in marriage between men and women with sakina and mawadda and rahmah. He describes these beautiful qualities of having tranquility, love in action, compassion for one another. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the spouses as libas, as clothing for one another. In Islam, we have beautiful principles on how to create that nurturing harmony within the family. Things like being able to have communication, shura, making sure that each individual is heard and seen within the family unit. There are legal aspects involved that can help protect the family. And there are contracts before the marriage and also options outside of the marriage in case it doesn't work for both parties, or to make sure that each party has their rights preserved. One of those aspects of Islamic relationships is this concept of qawama, of men being qawamoon. This concept is one that many of you might have heard of, but it is very misunderstood. The concept of men having this adjective, this practice, this verb, this action of being qawamoon is often misunderstood within the Muslim community. There are a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes the way that young women are raised give them the impression that men have a certain status for simply being men. For example, I've spoken with therapists who've told me that many of their clients are women who talk about how their parents differentiated between boys and girls in their family. So the boys did not have any responsibilities towards the family, nor did they have any accountability towards the family. The girls in the family had to clean after the boys. They had to pick up their trash. They had to do their dishes. They had a curfew of 8 p.m. while the boys could be out all night and didn't have anything that they actually had to contribute. This is a common concept that young women talk about. And so that experience as a young girl shapes the way that they start looking at how men in general are perceived within a Muslim culture. Another reason for this is because there are misunderstandings of text within Islam. For example, there is a famous hadith which is translated often as women are deficient in intellect and in religion. This hadith has been misconstrued because we haven't understood the meaning of it, while also not mentioning there are other narrations by the same narrators who made this narration, in which, in the same exact moment, but a different riwayah, they are praising women and talking about the benefits that they witnessed of women. Our misunderstanding of a narration, especially in the translation, then can aid us to put certain responsibilities on women without recognizing how that messaging is impacting how they're seeing religion and men in general. I have devoted a lot of time to looking at the texts in Islam, in Islamic law, where women's rights and responsibilities are mentioned, because I've had so many women specifically tell me that they don't know if they can be Muslim if this is how Islam views men versus women. I've also had men tell me that they strongly believe that their sisters, their mothers, their daughters deserve to have rights, and they don't understand how Islam could teach particular qualities. Our misunderstanding of the concept of men being qawamoon has caused a rift sometimes, because there is a societal push to follow certain ideologies or certain movements for women's rights. And that push is strengthened from within Muslim women ourselves when we feel like we are not being heard, and where we don't know how to express the need for that processing of what it means to be men and women together. But Islam actually provides the solution for men and women working together as allies, as the Quran describes us. Imagine the revelation coming to a society where men were actively inheriting women-like property. A man dies, his wife is inherited to his brother. a baby girl is born, she is buried alive, and oftentimes with the support of the mother. And we do have narrations of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu and the sadness he felt at what he had done in the past. But this was a culture in which part of manhood was actually violence towards women. And how do we know that? We know that because of the ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Because the way that this verse was revealed, one of the narrations for which the revelation came, it is a disputed narration. So it's not completely accepted as authentic from all of the scholars of hadith. But the narration mentions that a woman came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when she came with her father, and her husband had beaten her. She came complaining to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about what her husband had done, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replies. This is mentioned in the tafsir of Ibn al-Khazin. He replies and he says sallallahu alaihi wasallam that she should retaliate against her husband. As in, she should go and she should beat him as he beat her. Now, as she's turning with her father to go away, the Prophet ﷺ receives revelation, tells her to come back, and says that Allah has revealed something better. And then the verse that we often question, the verse that mentions the concept of darb, and the disputed idea of what darb means, is the verse revealed. Why does the Prophet ﷺ, for those who accept this as an authentic narration, again, it's not accepted as authentic fully from all the scholars of hadith, but for those who see it as the sabab and one of the reasons of the revelation, why would the Prophet ﷺ say that a better solution has been revealed? Imagine if the Prophet ﷺ had said that the way a woman gets back at her husband if he attacks her is by attacking him. Now, one, obviously, a woman or a man who is being abused has the right to defend themselves, 1,000,000%. There is a difference in Islamic law between domestic violence and darb. They are two completely different things. This is a society, we're not going into the concept of darb here because it's a different lecture, but the concept of darb was brought as a means of anger management and reconciliation between the spouses in a time where men would beat their wives and it was considered acceptable. This is mentioned by Ibn Ashur. So when we have now the Prophet ﷺ receiving revelation, and what is the beginning of this verse? It's saying الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ, that men are qawwamoon over women. What does it mean? There's only one other ayah in the Quran where men's status is mentioned, and it's وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً, that men have a degree over women. That is mentioned in verses of divorce. So the only two places that we have a discussion of men's status in this particular way is in reference to verses of divorce, and another one in which the Quran is responding to reconciliation between spouses with particular steps. Again, we're not talking about what darb means today, but I can tell you with full confidence that it is a means of reconciliation between spouses and bringing them together. So what does it actually mean then for men to be qawwamoon? Let's discuss that. Right now, what we are seeing in Palestine are men who are in flip-flops, men who have a t-shirt on, who are digging through rubble with their hands to save their family members. We have seen men who are holding children, rushing through hospitals, with themselves pouring with blood. We have seen men who are riding on the burial shroud of their wife, qalbi wa nuri wa my life, my heart, my moon. We have seen men hold other men and weep with them. When we see this level of emotion and this level of dedication, we are not seeing men say women take care of genocide. We are seeing men step up and protect women with their bodies. And we see women also partnering with men and protecting the society. But that feeling of seeing men stand and be defenders, when we saw that one of the hospitals was targeted, the young men of Gaza came and they defended the hospital with their bodies. They were chanting, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil, chanting that they are going to be there to defend the hospital with their bodies. I was so blessed and privileged to visit Masjid al-Aqsa this past Ramadan. And what I actually messaged my friends while I was there in Masjid al-Aqsa, I said, the men here are showing our ummah what Qawamoon looks like. Why? Because there was a khala, they're standing there and they're calling the crowds. It's like Hajj, everyone is stuck together trying to get through the city. And the men are calling out, Khala, watch out, there's a small step right there, you might trip if you don't see it. There was a man standing behind me. We are packed like sardines. I mean, everybody is stuck together. There was a man standing behind me, and he left this much space between us, and he was very physically stronger or bigger, I guess I should say, like this. And he was physically protecting the crowd from bumping into me, and he would keep calling out, stop pushing me, there is a woman in front of me. I saw a feeling, the feeling of what inspires the concept of Qawamoon. When women feel safe, when women feel taken care of, when women feel supported and heard and seen, this societal concept then creates an environment where women are open to listening and ready to share and have communication to consider the leadership of someone she respects and she admires, because she trusts that he has her best interests at heart. We see this in the companions, radiyallahu anhum. When we look at the companions, we have narrations of the way that they would interact with one another and the shift that happened with revelation. So for example, we have Umar radiyallahu anhu, who before Islam would physically assault those who would serve him who were women because they converted. And then afterwards he said, we used to think of women as nothing. Until what? It wasn't until women fought for their rights. It was until God revealed what he revealed and divided what he divided. He gave women rights, and so men listened to the rights that women had. When Umar radiallahu anhu was the leader of the believers, there would be women who would stop him, who would call out in the middle of a crowd, who as he's walking with an entourage of men who are part of his cabinet, would correct him. And there's a narration of Al-Jarud, and he would say, you're gonna stop and listen to a woman when all of these men are trying to talk to you? And he corrected him, and he said that this is a woman who Allah listened to. Of course I'm going to listen to her. I would stand here as long as she wants me to stand here. And the only reason I would leave is for salah, and then I would come back. This change in the way that men saw women was apparent in the narrations of Revelation, including in the way that women participated with men. The Prophet ﷺ said that women are the twin halves of men. When speaking to men, that women are your twin halves, they are your partners. Which is why we see there were 30 women on the battlefield in the time of the companions. And we see narrations from women in Bukhari and in Muslim talking about how they would serve in the wounded and take care of those who've passed. Imam al-Nawawi mentions that the women who were there part of taking care of those who were sick and wounded, those who they were mahram with, they would touch in the area all over, they were mahram, but those who they were not, they would only touch in the areas that were of necessity. The point is that they are working together in dire circumstances, and the Prophet ﷺ is teaching the men that women are in this space as well. And there are ways in which we support each other even in a space like battle. So we see that women were actively part of the society, were actively questioning even the Prophet ﷺ and being responded to, receiving guidance and mentorship on how to navigate that relationship. But we also see the societal shift. Why? Because imagine a society where as women we are told that you are property and many of your sisters have been killed because they were born girls. How is that going to impact women's psyche? So to shift that narrative and to have a society now in which men and women are partners, except that men have something else for women too. What is that something else? Ibn Abbas mentions it's taklif. It's extra responsibility towards women. Other commentators of Quran, when they're looking at الرجال قوامون على النساء, they have differences of opinion. One, some scholars, this is a minority of scholars, they say that this verse doesn't actually mean that all men are qawamoon for all women. They say that this is specific to husbands and wives. Why? Because the rest of the verse addressing the relationship between husbands and wives. The majority of commentators, though, say that this is between men and women in general. And what does it actually mean? How are men qawamoon? Al-Razi, Ibn Ashur, As-Sabuni, and so many other narrators of tafsir that we look at from the classical times until more contemporary times define it in specific ways. One, that men are financially responsible for women. Two, that men are the caretakers and supporters of women. Three, that men are the defenders of women. For women who are listening, many times, if someone has had understandable trauma, it's very hard to navigate these associations with the concept of men being protectors because of trauma. And it's really important for us now to acknowledge that our community has trauma. This is real in our community, which is why it's so important to go to therapy, why it's so important to navigate what that looks like. But also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't simply say that men are this way just because they are born men. They have a responsibility to fulfill these aspects of manhood towards women. If they do not, they are not fulfilling the concept of being qawamoon, and then legal aspects come into play. Legal aspects such as, this verse talks about nushuz of the woman, but there's another ayah in the Quran that talks about the nushuz of the man. What is a nushuz? What is nushuz? Nushuz in general, because this is a super short lecture and I only have 2 minutes left, is the concept of rebelling against your spouse for no reason. It's unilateral rebellion. As in, your spouse, whether your husband or wife, treats you kindly, respectfully, you listen to one another, and yet the other person tries to harm the other person, not to get back at the other person, but just because. How do the scholars describe the nushuz of the husband? Now, there are differences of opinion between the madahib, but to give you a brief summary of the general overarching concepts, to be verbally abusive to her, to neglect her, to make fun of her, to speak ill of her with his friends, to physically abuse her, to abuse her in the bedroom, to be harmful to her in money, to travel without her permission. These are general aspects that talk about physical and emotional harm. From the man is all considered nushuz as well. This means that a man who is not practicing the concept of qiwama, he's entering into these aspects, and this is when she can take it into a court, and she can ask for her rights in a court. Now, of course, women have definitions of nushuz as well. This isn't that lecture at this time, that's why I'm focusing on qawama. But the point is that Islamic law doesn't simply say, maybe you have struggles with considering men as people who are safe for you because you've had childhood trauma, therefore, that's all. No, Islamic law puts safeguards into place to ensure that women and men have their rights and responsibilities met from a legal perspective, which means that when a man is qawwam, he is taking care of her financially, but sometimes women may feel that dependency causes her to be trapped because of very real circumstances. So Islamic law then puts other economic options for women to navigate with the support of her husband before they get married, so that she always has a sense of her economic stability, even in times where there is instability within the home. The general concept of qawama is one which is intended to bring harmony, reconciliation, and stability between spouses. It is one which is intended to create a place where children feel like they are heard and seen because they see their parents hearing and seeing one another. And being able to facilitate that type of environment is something we see so much so in the companions, that when a man came to Umar radiallahu anhu because he wanted to complain about his wife, he heard her shouting at Umar through the door. When they finished, he asked for permission to enter, and he said to Umar radiallahu anhu, I wanted to complain about my wife, but then I came in and I heard your wife yelling at you. Umar radiallahu anhu responded saying, she does so much for me. She does so much for me. What is it if she just needs to let off some steam and have me listen to what she says? That relationship we see in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, because he also got into arguments, and the mothers of the believers got into arguments with the Prophet ﷺ. We see that through the best of companions, including Ali and Fatima radiallahu anhuma. We have narrations of the best getting into marriage conflict, which teaches us that it's okay to have disagreement. It's okay to have issues. It's okay to be upset and need some space. And with that, we are still allies. We are still partners. We work towards building trust and harmony and action and love in action and compassion with one another. And most importantly, we build our relationship based on our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah, we're going to hear much more specific details from the expert, Dr. Naha, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.